and welcome to another exclusive interview with Recovery Today magazine and Recovery Today podcast, where first and foremost, we are a magazine of hope. Whether you're considering addiction recovery for yourself or a loved one, or you're actively in recovery for however many years, you'll find information on all topics related to addiction, recovery, and living a happy, successful life sober at Recovery Today. My name is Caroline Beidler, and I'm a new correspondent with Recovery Today. And today I am so excited to be joining a very special guest, Dr. Lee Warren. Dr. Warren is a brain surgeon, author, podcaster, veteran, and his new book, Hope is the First Dose, a treatment plan for recovering from trauma, tragedy, and other massive things, is out now wherever you buy books. On his weekly podcast, Dr. Warren offers prescriptions from neuroscience, faith, and common sense on how to lead a healthier, better, and happier life. Dr. Warren is fond of saying, you can't change your life until you change your mind, and he teaches his audience the art of self-brain surgery to get it done. I absolutely love how Dr. Warren's message resonates with the recovery community, and how he even includes stories of folks like myself in addiction recovery in his books. Hope is a huge part of the recovery journey, and why I just had to invite Dr. Warren to be my first guest as a new Recovery Today correspondent. All right, are we all set to jump right in here? So listen up. Welcome, Dr. Warren. So glad that you can join the Recovery Today family.
Caroline, it's an honor to be with you. It's good to see you again. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, we're so delighted to have you, Dr. Warren. And first off, I would love to start off with this question. What is your why? Why do you do what you do?
Well, I think it all relates back to being a physician. I grew up wanting to be a doctor. I've always wanted to try to help people when something hurt or when they were having a problem. And so I became a brain surgeon and in the pursuit of that goal. And then after we lost our son in 2013, it really, I think even dating back to when I got home from the Iraq War and had some post-traumatic stress and all of that, I've used writing and communicating as a way to try to help people by giving them some of the things I've learned along the way that helped me, which I think is a great sort of way that recovery works too, right? Is helping other people manage by prescribing some of the things that work for you. So I think my why is I want to become healthier and feel better and be happier. And I want other people to do that too.
I love that. And I love how you touched on the recovery journey also, because you're right. It is so much about giving back and almost using our own experiences and stories as a way to inform how we can be of service and give back to others. Now, your new book, Hope is the First Dose, which, by the way, everyone needs a copy of this book. I am now reading it through for the second time after going through yet another massive thing in my life that I'm needing some hope for. And you write about hope. Can you tell us a little bit more about why you've decided to write about hope, given some of the hard things that you've experienced in your own life?
Well, the first thing is, as a neurosurgeon, I encounter people with fatal brain cancers and diseases that they're not going to recover from, injuries that they're not going to recover from, and their families a lot. And so my first sort of diving into hope as a means of helping people was when I discovered in my work with these people that are dying, and even people that are encountering hard things, whether they die or not, is that if you lose hope, you really can't have a life regardless of what happens to your body. Like the hopelessness turns out to be way deadlier than cancer, because I've met so many people that survive their problem, but still their life is wrecked. They drink themselves to death, or they lose their family because they just can't get over this thing that's happened to them, or they can't stop ruminating about it, and it becomes the defining thing of their life. And if you lose hope, you just lose everything. And so I figured out, as a provider, a healthcare provider, that helping people hold on to and maintain and hold on to hope and faith is as important, often sometimes more important, as anything I can do in the operating room with my hands as a surgeon. And then when we lost our son, I realized like it's a real thing. Like you can lose hope and think that your life is not ever going to be better than it is right now. And if that happens, then you're gonna die, or you're going to become a shell of a person and revolve around that one event for the rest of your life, and it'll become the only thing that you can see in your whole life. Or you have to find a way to coexist with that pain and still find the joy and meaning and purpose in life again. And that's where hope is. And so for me, hope is the thing that drives us to take those steps to get in recovery or get back in church or find a way forward again. Hope is the engine that allows us to move again when we've gone through these massive things.
Agreed, 100%. And it reminded me, I was talking to a friend of mine in recovery the other day, and she also lost a child, and just the immense grief that she's gone through with that. And I also recently lost, a family member, my father, and we were talking, and I said, I got through this experience. I'm grieving without going back out, without picking up, drugs or alcohol, or, trying to kind of anesthetize, numb out the feelings that I'm going through. And she kind of laughed a little bit, and she's been through this in such a deep, profound way, the grief process. And she said, welcome to the no matter what club. No matter what, we hang on to that hope. No matter what, we know that we can get through whatever it is, whatever massive thing, whatever loss, whatever experience in this life, whatever trouble, we can get through it and stay in recovery and stay sober. And I agree. I love the way that the focal point is hope, because without that, I was thinking with my latest experience of loss, how would I get through this without recovery? Or for me personally, and you talk a lot about your own faith and spiritual journey, without a faith in God. How can we do this without hope? I also love, so I'm a big fan. I also love another earlier book of yours called I've Seen the End of You. And I was really struck by the character of Joey, who you talk about and who you met as a surgeon. And can you tell me a little bit about his story and how it moved you, and maybe how that relates to hope?
Yeah. So Joey was the guy who I started identifying these patterns that people fall into when they encounter these big things. And one of the patterns that surprised me the most was the people who don't have anything that they would identify as hopeful or faithful in their lives until they encounter a massive thing. And Joey's one of those guys. I call them climbers. So Joey was a guy who his mom died shortly after he was born. His father abandoned him. He was raised by his grandmother. He unfortunately got into drugs and alcohol. And I met him when he was basically cooking meth, and the DEA raided his house, and he ended up in an altercation and got his head conked in with a bully stick, a baton. A police officer hit him in the head and fractured his skull, and he had some brain bleeding. So I had to take him to surgery. And while in surgery, I saw something funny, and it turned out to be a brain tumor that he did not know he had. And so we removed that during the surgery, and it turned out to be a really early tumor. And I thought that was going to potentially be saving him, because that would have inevitably gone on to become a malignancy that would have killed him. And so when he was recovering from surgery, he had been such a down and out guy and such an angry, sort of unhappy person, that when I told him he had brain cancer, his response was sort of like, well, of course I do. Why wouldn't I have brain cancer? Everything else in my life sucks. Why wouldn't this happen to you? He was just defeated, right? He was just a defeated guy. But remarkably, over the course of the last year of his life, when his brain tumor came back and he was literally dying of cancer, he reconnected with his family in a deeper level, and he met a chaplain that came alongside him and introduced him to faith. And he came alive. That this man blossomed in his heart and in his spirit during this last year of his life. And he fell in love and got his GED and kind of put his whole life back together while he was dying. And he told me shortly before he died, Doc, this was the best year of my life. And the difference was hope, Caroline. The difference was he found something that gave his life meaning and purpose. Even though he now knew his life wasn't going to be very long, it now meant something, and it never had meant anything for him before. And the difference was hope. That he had something he could believe in that was bigger than he was. And that was Joey. And that was the story that really inspired me.
Joey, and it inspired me so much too when you talked about it in your book. I've seen the end of you, and Joey reminds me so much of not just my story of kind of redemption through the recovery process, but so many stories I've heard in the rooms of recovery. And listeners, folks watching Recovery Today family, I'm sure can connect with that almost opportunity to live life again, live life anew as a new
Yeah.
creation. And Joey was given this gift through through his diagnosis and just through all of these things. What a beautiful story. And so hope filled, so hope filled. And in terms of that recovery process, can you share a little bit about how the recovery process has worked in your own life? It may not be, the same recovery as me or someone else who's listening. I believe we're all in recovery from something, but that process of recovery, how it's played out in your own life.
Yeah, I mean, what we're recovering from is not substance abuse. It's losing a child, and in a very real sense, that put me in a hole that threatened to define the rest of my life. And I immediately began to question everything I thought I believed, everything I thought that I knew. I doubted whether I never really thought he wasn't real, but I started to think that maybe he didn't love me or care about me, or maybe he wasn't trustworthy. And so the things that I normally relied on, Caroline, to hold me up during hard times didn't seem so trustworthy in that time. And so for the last 10 years have been a discovery journey of me figuring out that the bottom really did hold when I fell down onto it, that those baseline beliefs really do turn out to be true, that God is close to the brokenhearted, that it is good to taste and see that he is God, because everything else that you taste and see, and this is where I think substances come in sometimes. We try to take something or drink something or experience something that makes us stop thinking about it. And I did that too. But what I found is everything else that I tasted and saw didn't turn out to be helpful to me. That the next day I still had just as much grief and just as much pain and just as much doubt and just as much fear. And now I also had a day that was wasted because I didn't feel good, or something else happened. So for me, it just turned out that nothing that I looked at, nothing that I attempted, nothing that I pursued turned out to have any hope or meaning or purpose in it, except finding my way back to the things I'd always thought were true, which is that there really is a God. He really does love me, that his character is good. He did not cause this to happen. He doesn't want me to hurt, and he's got a plan to redeem all of this someday, and I get to see my son again. So for me, this has been a 10-year process of recovering from something. And the most important lesson I think I learned in all that way is you can't recover from everything. You won't ever stop hurting. You won't ever stop being an addict or a person who's bereaved. That'll always be true. But what's also true is that you have a life that means something, and there's purpose and there's value and there's still beauty in the world. And so I found this word "and" instead of "but." So it was always, I was happy, but my son died, and I was okay, and I had a future, but my son was murdered, and I was okay, but this happened, and I had to switch that. I had to transplant it in my own brain with "and." Like I had a son, and he died, and I have a granddaughter, and I have 4 other children, and I've got this beautiful wife and a family and a practice and purpose, and people are learning from my books, and I've got a life that means something, even though I lost my son. And so it had to become sort of a massive, horrible thing that happened in the sea of good things that are also happening in my life. And that melding of the pain and the beauty, the "and" is what gave me the hope to keep moving forward.
I love that. The "and" also, and just how powerful that is when you can have that change of perspective. And like you mentioned, it's been a 10-year process, and it's ongoing. We're not recovered, we're in recovery. It's an
Yep.
active process. And for whatever we're recovering from, whether, it's a loss of a child or substance use. And for those of us in substance use, with issues and addiction recovery, generally, most often for many of us, it's a symptom of something greater that's happened, other massive
Yeah.
things and hard things that have happened in our lives. Your book also talks about a treatment plan. And I love this because it's so solution focused and gives readers really a guide and tools to be solution focused in recovering from those hard things. Can you, without giving too much away, can you just share really briefly about that treatment plan and why you chose to have that solution based focus in your book?
Yeah, well, it started again with this idea that I wanted to be prescriptive. I wanted to be a good doctor, and I want to give you some tools you can use, even if I can't take you to surgery and fix it myself. And as we know, as you know from being in recovery, like the biggest change you have to make is in your own mind. Like you've got to think differently about this thing that I have done to try to solve this other problem that's really the source of it doesn't work. And so I need to find something else that does work. And so for me, it naturally came in sort of medical surgical metaphors when I started thinking, how do I describe this process that people go through? But then I realized and discovered it wasn't just a metaphor, it was also actually physiologically true on the neuroscience side, that when we change how we think about things, we change the way that our brain works, and we can flip this script that most people suffer under, which is we feel something or think something and we react to that, and then our life becomes about reacting to the thing that we thought or felt. But it turns out that you have about 40,000 negative thoughts a day, and about 5 to 1, they're not true. That most of the things that we think about aren't actually true. And most of the feelings that we feel aren't actually pointing us towards something that's true and real. Feelings turn out to be not facts, they're chemical events in your brain. And so you can feel something that makes you feel afraid, and there's not actually anything to be afraid of, because it's the same neurotransmitter that makes you feel afraid when there's a bear in your house that's trying to kill you, right? We have a limited palette of chemicals that trigger the emotional responses that we have as human beings. So the treatment plan then is a way to describe as best I can in practical ways how you can kind of try to become a little bit more resilient and bulletproof to the inevitable massive things that are going to happen in your life. And in a nutshell, it starts by being aware, kind of trauma informed, and aware that people go through hard things. And it's reasonable then to assume that you're going to go through hard things and to prepare yourself for them. I thought about this fact that every kid in American schools are taught what to do if you catch on fire, right? You're taught stop, drop, and roll. Like we all know that. I'm 54. I've never caught on fire, but I know exactly what I'm going to do if I catch on fire. I'm going to stop, drop, and roll. We teach people how to change tires. We teach them how to operate defibrillators. We teach people CPR because it's likely that you may face a situation where you need to know how to do those things. But we don't teach anybody to be ready for emotional trauma. We don't have a plan in place, or what am I going to do if something horrible happens? How am I going to respond? And so I put this idea together of prehab. Like in my practice, if you hurt your back and you come to see me and say, hey, hurt my back, and I do an MRI and you've got a ruptured disc and you're going to need surgery, I'm probably going to send you to physical therapy before you have surgery to help you get stronger, to learn some mechanical things that'll keep you from getting injured after surgery, to help you recover from the procedure more effectively. So you're getting stronger and more ready to go through the trauma of having surgery, right? So prehab then on the emotional side is put some stuff in your heart that that you trust, that's not going to fall when you hit this hard thing. Put some scripture in there. Put some writings from some writers that you trust, with some music or some true things, some relationships in your life that you can count on to be there for you when you have this massive thing happen in your life. That's the prehab part. You get stronger, you get more resilient, you get more able to handle the thing when it actually does happen. And then when it does happen, is when it's time for self-brain surgery. It's when it's time to understand big, massive emotional traumas create a toxic storm of neurochemicals in my brain that make me think all kinds of things that aren't necessarily true. I'm a loser. I'll never be able to be okay again. Nobody's ever going to love me again. I'm not going to survive this, right? Those things that you think, and it happens in recovery when you mess up and you fall and you have to start over, right? You have all this shame and guilt, and nobody will ever trust me again. I've burned all my bridges. And none of those things are true. Like people are ready to come alongside you and help you get better. And so you have to have this self brain surgery ability to say, wait a minute, time out. That thought isn't true. It's not kind. It's not helpful. It's not compassionate toward myself. It's not helpful to make me able to go forward again. So I need to take that thought and get rid of it and transplant a thought that is true and is kind and is helpful and is able to help me move forward. So that self brain surgery piece involves biopsying your thoughts. I call it, some surgeons, I would biopsy things all the time and look at them, because you don't know what something is until you take a second to look at it and decide if it needs to be acted on or removed or replaced or eradicated. So the self-brain surgery thing is this idea of what 2 Corinthians 10:5 says: take every thought captive. So if you know there's 40,000 negative thoughts a day that pop into your head and the vast majority of them are not true, then you need to be ready to take captive a thought that isn't true and get rid of it and put something back in there that's better for you so that you can start moving forward again. That's the nuts and bolts of it. And then the rehab, the post-op phase of it is go get yourself a community, get yourself some people around you who are going to help you get stronger and overcome this thing and not fall back into bad patterns of thinking or behaviors, to try to help you move forward, and get yourself some practices and some things that you do in your life to create better synapses in your brain, to automate some things that are going to be more helpful to you than these patterns that you've had. Your brain makes new neurons every day. You wake up every morning with new brain cells and they're waiting for a job to do. And most of them will automatically wire into previous synaptic pathways of things that you've always thought and felt and done, unless you give them a different job to do. This science is called directed neuroplasticity. But what it really is teaching your brain how to take new cells and give them new jobs that are more helpful to you. And that's surgery in a nutshell. Is what we do is to try to make somebody's body behave in a way that the disease is not going to allow it to behave. And you can do that with your own thinking, and you can make your life better.
So actionable. And can I just say, I could just listen to your treatment plan all day, because not only is it informed by your own personal experience, but just the expertise behind what you're talking about. And again, just relating it back to recovery. There's so many of us that have experienced setbacks. Some people call them relapses, recurrence of use. I'm a firm believer that addiction recovery does not have to include those setbacks and recurrences of use, though it can certainly be a part of a journey. But so much is about interrupting those patterns, those habits. I can't speak as intelligently about it in terms of the neuroscience, but interrupting those old patterns and replacing them with new healthy behaviors, healthy thoughts. And I can't speak to how many years I've wasted kind of trapped in this unhealthy thinking, feeling like I'm somehow a victim of my thoughts, that they're just controlling me, when the truth of the matter is just because I'm thinking it, like you said, doesn't make it true. Generally, as a sick person who has a substance use disorder, most of my thinking at certain points has been very untrue, very sick, very unhealthy. And so I love that you give practical tools to interrupt some of those really unhealthy patterns. And I think for the recovery community specifically, I work with a lot of women with significant trauma histories, myself, included. I've experienced that. Having these tools that provide us with kind of a sense of ownership and agency, that we have the choice, we can take action, and do these, not simple necessarily, but in a sense, really, they are. Simple action steps towards healing, and, taking us one step closer to have that more hopeful mindset, and to have hope front and center, instead of maybe our past and our mistakes and trauma and all of the, the hard things. I love it. Thank you so much. I've so enjoyed our conversation today, and I'd love to end with one of your prescriptions, if you wouldn't mind, for the Recovery Today community and family. If you could write a prescription for hope for the listener today who needs it, what would it be?
I think the most important thing, friend, is to be aware that you're going to encounter another hard thing, that the recovery that you're on isn't the last hard thing that you're going to go through. And so when you do face that hard thing, just remember that hope is a verb. It's an action word, and you can create it even when you feel hopeless. You can create it by the two elements of hope, which are memory and movement. So memory means you look back on your past and you remember that there were times before when you thought you could not make it, but somehow you did. God helped you through it. A friend came alongside you. You remembered a phone number and you called it and somebody helped you. There was a time in your past when you hit something really, really hard and you made it through. And after it, you were able to move forward. So when you hit it this time, remember that it's not the first time or if you don't have that experience, think about somebody else that has successfully navigated a hard thing, because other people are a lot like you are too, and they've made it through hard things. And then the most important piece is, after you remember that hope is possible, move towards it, because feelings follow actions. So if you say, I have all these bad feelings, I'm concerned, I'm worried, I think I'm going to fall, remember that your feelings will reliably follow your movement. So you move towards something that's true. I'm going to try to get stronger by moving towards, I'm going to go to a meeting. I'm going to call somebody who cares about me. I'm going to make a phone call. I'm going to do something to help myself move. And before you know it, you'll find, hey, I made it through that day. And if you make it through that day, you got hope you can make it through the next day. And that, my friend, is what will help you change your mind and change your life.
Thank you so much, Dr. Warren. It was a joy to speak with you today. Dr. Warren's book, Hope is the First Dose. Get your copy today. Thank you.
Thank you, Caroline.